Okay, well, welcome to the Find My Past community and our first Let's Discuss session. My name is Jen Baldwin. I am the Data Acquisition Manager for North America for Find My Past. It's a job that I absolutely love. I get the opportunity every day to think about how to preserve historical records and what kind of records might be intriguing to genealogists around the world, and I think it's just a really exciting position. But as we all know, today, in this era, we find ourselves in a time in our lives that will probably never be repeated, we hope, and certainly something that is new to all of us. And so we wanted to offer something new at Find My Past. We wanted to actually just get together and have a conversation about genealogy. I think one of the things I miss most during this kind of self-isolation time, lockdown time, is the ability to talk to people about my research, people that share the same kind of passion that I do. And I realized it actually when you started seeing all of the conferences around the country and around the world kind of being canceled or delayed or moved into a virtual space. All of those things are essential and important to protect ourselves, but it made me realize that I wasn't going to be able to see my friends very much this year. And a lot of my friends are fellow genealogists. So we decided to come up with a platform that could bring some of us together in a communal way, right? And allow us the chance to talk to each other and engage with each other, learn from each other. So we're excited to launch our Let's Discuss series this afternoon. For those of you who are familiar with Find My Past, you're fans of Find My Past, you know that we are a UK-based company. And most of the material that we provide, most of the content we do is from the UK, right? So the vast majority of our experts are based in Britain or Wales or Scotland or Ireland. And we have a very small team over here in North America, but we decided we wanted to do something in North American time zones. So that is why we're launching this at the time we are, right? So it's 2:00 Mountain Time in Colorado, where I'm at. And that puts us, I think, at around 9:00 p.m. UK time. So I'm here, I'm doing it. I don't have any tech support. I'm all by myself. But I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be having this conversation with all of you. So that's kind of how this was born and why this started. And we hope that it works for you. We hope that it provides you a place to get together with your genealogy buddies as well. And learn some things and talk about some things and ask some questions. And we just think it's wonderful. So some of you are already starting to comment on the post. That's great. Thank you for being here. Julie, hi. It's so good to see you here. Julie is a friend of mine that I've known for years that I met at, I think, NGS conference was the first time we met. She is a nurse, and she's amazing, and she works with babies, and she's just a wonderful person and a wonderful genealogist. So hi, Julie. Thank you very much for being here. Tammy from British Columbia is also with us. Hi, Tammy. I don't have a personal bio on you. I'm sorry. But it's lovely to have you with us from BC, which is great. I actually grew up in Washington State, so used to go to British Columbia actually every couple of years or so. It was always a lot of fun, a lot of good times. Lori from Philadelphia is with us. It's 4:00 on the East Coast. That's right, Lori. We're hoping that this time frame works for everybody, and it's kind of a comfortable time. So if you have suggestions for this format, if you have questions you want to ask us, or if you have topic ideas, or if you want to just say, actually, you should push it back 2 hours, or you should move it forward 2 hours, or whatever it is, please do leave those comments and suggestions. We're all ears. This is absolutely an experiment. We're doing kind of learning on the fly. So if there's something that you see us doing that you don't like, or maybe you think we could do better, by all means throw it out there and let me know so that we can adjust. Mary Feenan has posted a question about her ancestor from Scotland. Mary, I did see that question, right? I think you posted it on the page like an hour ago or so. So I have a couple of things to mention about that question. We'll get into that in a few minutes, but I also am going to refer you to our Scottish expert. So I'm going to send that question his way, Mary, to see if he has suggestions as well. And hopefully he's not watching, because it's late at his house right now. He should be balancing work and life, right? But again, if you have any suggestions or comments, or if you have questions, please, by all means, share those in the thread, in the chat, so that we can so that we can share those with our team and get back to you on those. So hi to Janet. I'm looking at my phone. Sorry, I'm using multiple devices to make this work. From Bellevue, Janet, it's great to have you. Thank you. I have lots of memories in Bellevue. In fact, I lived there for a little while. From California, that's so wonderful. From, who's that? Sharon. Thank you, Sharon, for joining us from California. And Janet says, thank you for doing this. Janet, thank you so much for being a part of it. It really wouldn't be what we want it to be without all of you guys kind of participating and commenting. And that's we really would love to see that. I would much rather have this be a conversation between people than just me talking. So we'll figure this all out. We'll get through this together, right? And that's what it's all about. All right. So let's, Nicole Long says, hi, and I love genetics. You know what, Nicole? I love genetics too. You know what else I love? I love really smart people who can explain genetics to me. Genetic genealogy is fascinating. I just think it's absolutely amazing what it can do. I am still I consider myself still very much a beginner when it comes to DNA. I'm still working through that. But I hope to learn a lot from the community. And I'm actually hoping that maybe we can get one or two of those genetic genealogists on here with us to explore their brains and ask them questions. So hopefully that will happen at some point in the future. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So let's talk about today's topic is kind of researching in the UK, but specifically from the mindset of someone who is in North America, right? And that I think is challenging and I think is intimidating to some of us. I know it certainly was for me when I started researching my British and Irish families. So I think I have two objectives today. The first would be that there are some really distinct differences in the way you do genealogy research in the UK. And then the second message is how to prepare yourself to actually start that process. And those are two kind of different things, but they cross over a lot. So I'm going to start with the differences in UK research that, in my opinion, make the most difference. Now, some of you may have different opinions and may have found different things and learned different things along the way. So please share those in the comments. I'd love to know what you're thinking. In fact, everybody went silent for a couple minutes in the comments, so I'm hoping you're all still out there watching. But I'm going to just talk through a couple of things that I think make a difference. And coming from my perspective, right? I work for a UK-based company, and I have for about 7 years now. I have learned a lot about British and Irish research, but the way that I have learned the most is just by applying it to my own family. And even though I work for a UK company, my job is still very much focused in North America, right? I still really work on North American projects. That's really my focus. So I spend most of my time over here, actually. What that means, though, is that I have a very unique viewpoint where I get to see what's happening in the UK market and the UK genealogy community from the standpoint of digital preservation and research trends and what our customers are doing, what they're talking about, what they're thinking about, historical events that happen in the UK that we don't necessarily pay attention to over here, and vice versa. But I also get the US side of things and the Canadian side of things. So it's a really interesting seat to be in, right? Because I get a little bit of both worlds. And I think there's actually just kind of very few of us that actually have that kind of perspective. So it's a really, really an interesting position, interesting place to be and learn from. Vicky says she's still watching. Thank you, Vicky, for sticking it out with me. That's great. So I think from that perspective, here are the things that to me stand out as kind of the most important differences between US or North American research and UK research. The first thing is, guess what, you guys? They have a national religion in the UK. So when you start your research in British Isles, one of the first things you should do is look at parish registers. In North America, right? One of the first things we always say is look at the census, and that's absolutely true. And it's true in the UK as well. But because they have a national religion, they have this fantastic collection of parish registers that goes back well into the 1600s and even earlier. And it's consistent and it's countrywide, right? It just goes from one end of the island to the other. And it's incredible. It's absolutely amazing to get into these records. And once you find the parish that you're interested in and the family, things start to really fall together in many cases. So it's exciting to get into these parish registers, but often from the North American perspective, right, we don't think about it because we don't have a national religion. We don't have any kind of national collection of parish registers. We have some big collections. We have Catholic records, and we have Lutheran records, and the German Lutherans were fantastic, and all sorts of denominations that have these great collections, but they're not national in scope, and they don't go back and cover the entire history of kind of the written word of the country, and they're certainly not standardized in any way. Now, some of these early records in the UK aren't standardized either, but they tend to get more standardized faster than we did over here in North America. So it's this concept that it's not a struggle to look for religious records, right? I was raised Catholic, and my mom's side of the family is all Catholic and has been for several generations. So for me, finding religious records is really hard sometimes, right? And access is difficult. But in the UK, when you go to the parish registers, you realize that, actually, they're all just kind of right there. Now, a lot of them are on Findmypast, and this is a Findmypast platform, so I have to talk about what's on the site. Some of them are in other places, though. So you, just like with any other research project, you're not going to be able to go to one site, one source, and find all the answers. You're going to have to dig around and figure out where the records are for your county or your parish of interest. But once you find them, they're a fantastic resource. So, that's difference number one, is a national religion. Difference number two is the exact same concept, but from a governmental perspective. So they have civil registration that starts, again, countrywide in the UK, that started in July of 1837. And for those of us who have families in North America for a long time, 1837 is one of those parts of American history, and I'm not 100% sure on Canadian, but I think so as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. American history, it's particularly difficult to find family relationships and records through kind of 1800 to 1850-ish. I kind of refer to it as the gray area, the black hole of American genealogy. So having civil registration that starts in 1837 is kind of incredible, right? So what that means is that you have actually two national systems to go to. You have a religious system, and you have a civil registration system. Now, the civil registration records are on the GRO website, the General Records Office, But the process is really simple. You can use the indexes that are available on your favorite genealogy site, look up the record, transfer that information into the GRO website, and actually just order a PDF. It does take a little bit of money. I think last time I checked, it was £7.50 or £8.25, something in that neighborhood, less than £10. And I got the copy of my document in a couple of days via email on PDF, and it's great, right? It's this fantastic system. So while we can't immediately access those GRO records, right from Findmypast, you can absolutely find them in the indexes and then make the request and order that document. So make sure that you look at both of those national collections, the parish records and civil registration starting in July of 1837. Now, of course, they also have their census records, and census is just as important in the UK as it is in the US. Let's talk about what British-Irish census looks like. They start, generally speaking, they started earlier, but they're available from 1841 through 1911. So remember that in the UK, they have a 100-year privacy policy, not 72 years like it is in the US. And the census records are on the 1 years, right? 1841, 1851, 1861, whereas we're right on the decades. So 1850, 1860, 1870. And then on Findmypast, there's also the 1939 register, which is not technically a census, but it is a very important census-like, census substitute document collection that goes much further. So it gets a little bit closer to our kind of accustomed to, we're accustomed now to the 1940 census. It gets us a little closer to that period. And it's particularly important because of the record loss during World War I and World War II, right? They didn't do actually a 1941 census. And so the 1939 register is kind of all they have for that period. So currently available, again, 1841 and 1911. The 1921 census is the next one to be released. It will be available actually on Findmypast next year. We're really, really excited. It's a fantastic project. And it will be the largest collection kind of its kind for the British Isles. So it's an incredible collection. I haven't seen any of it yet. It's all in lockdown. It's all very private and secure. But I've heard about it from my colleagues. And it's just going to be an incredible record set. Now, from our perspective, again, as U.S. researchers, North American researchers, think about all the number of ancestors that came over in the early 1920s, right? You thought of war brides that came over. You have people that were immigrating from Eastern Europe, and they might have spent 6 to 12 months in Liverpool before they came over. Liverpool was one of the biggest ports for immigration at the time. And actually, part of my family, I think, is in the 1921 census, and I can't wait to find out. They were Germans from Russia. They went overland from their village in Russia up to the Black Sea, got on a boat, crossed over to England, at some point made it to Liverpool, where they were for probably at least 6 or 7 months before they got on their boat and came to Canada. And that just happens to be the period in which the 1921 census was taken. So I just cannot wait for the 1921 census. All right, so those are kind of a couple of key things. If you have questions about what I just covered, please do put them in the comments, or if you have other suggestions. Now, I have a couple other things I'm going to talk about. I'm not done. But I want to keep the conversation moving between us. So please do comment as you watch. Okay, so we've covered... And I just got an error saying that there's a problem with the video. So can anybody comment and tell me whether or not the video is still playing on your side? I hope it's playing. Having trouble playing this video. Okay, well, I don't know if you guys can still hear me. Looks fine from here. Okay. All right. Okay, good. So I'm just going to keep talking. Thank you guys very much. Seeing and hearing you. Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody, for telling me. No problems. Lori says, Julie says she can see me. All right. I'm just going to keep talking. I'm just going to pretend that the video is working fine. Sorry for that glitch. That's great. Okay, good. Thank you very much. All right. So a couple other major things to think about when you are getting started with UK research. We've talked about the Parish Collection. We've talked about civil registration starting in 1837. We've talked about Census Records. So a couple other things. First, when you start your UK research, I want you to put on your British hat or your Welsh hat, your Scottish hat, your Irish hat, whatever it is, whatever applies. Change your thinking a little bit because, of course, they do things slightly differently, right? Things are spelled a little bit differently. They use OUs and S's instead of Z's, where we would not. But one of my favorite examples to get this point across, actually, is how you think of events across history. So here in North America, we might refer to the War of 1812, right, which was an important military engagement for the history of both Canada and the United States in a variety of different ways, and an important component to American research. And yes, we fought that war with England, but they don't call it the War of 1812, right? For them, it was part of the larger Napoleonic Wars. And as a result, the records that were generated during that time frame are part of the Napoleonic War record collection. So if you are looking for War of 1812 time frame, and you're looking for, your British ancestor that fought in that war, maybe you're looking for an American who was taken as a prisoner of war by the British, you need to look in the Napoleonic War collection, not look for the War of 1812, especially on a site like Findmypast that is designed by people who understand the British side of that history, right? And put those British hats on, put those UK hats on, and make sure that you're thinking about things from the perspective of the people who created the records in the first place that you're searching out, right? If the records were created by Irish, then think about them from an Irish perspective and put yourself in Irish history. If you're thinking about them in the colonial era of North American history, right, in the early 1600s, when we have this massive influx of English immigrants, any records are created by people who consider themselves English. And at that point, of course, they were English. So put that perspective in your brain and make sure that you're thinking about it from that standpoint. So Ron says, what about old records? He has a maternal line that left the UK for the colonies in the 1620s, have no idea in Britain where they came from. Well, Ron, there are actually a lot of opportunities for you. One project that you should definitely look up is called the Great Migration Project. It's actually run out of the New England Historic Genealogical Society, or NEHGS, out of Boston, but they have a fantastic website, so look them up, Great Migration Project. They also published a series of books, and the first one is Great Migration Directory, which actually lists everybody who came over from 1620 to 1640, so right in the period that you're looking for, and it will give you a variety of sources that you can then go pull up and look at articles and other source material for that particular ancestor. All right, so one other misconception that I want to cover before we get into more generic questions and research situations is the idea of geography. There is, generally speaking, kind of a misconception that people in England didn't move around very much. But in fact, they did, actually. They just didn't move very far, right? When we, especially in America, speaking from the perspective of someone who was raised in the West, it's a big country. And when we think about our ancestors moving, like one of my ancestral lines went from New York to Michigan to Nebraska to Washington State, right? From one side of the country to the other in 3 generations. And so for me, when I think about my ancestors moving around, that's what I think of, is like hundreds of miles at a time, right? Getting in the wagon and going across the plains. Especially towards the 18th century, a little bit into the 19th century, when there were so many seasonal laborers moving around England, they were just that. They were seasonal laborers. So they would move from town to town, village to village, farm to farm, every season to try and find work. So they may not have moved very far. They probably stayed within a 20 to 30 mile radius, but they did move. And that means that they moved across parish lines and they moved across county lines. So when it comes to the idea of researching in the UK, researching in England in particular, people did move around, and you do need to look at neighboring counties and neighboring parishes. So from a geography perspective, right, we can never have enough maps. I say that all the time, and it's important in every aspect of genealogy, no matter what area of the world you're looking at. But you need to think about the fact that records were created in, generally speaking, one of those 2 categories, right? Parish and religious records, like we've already talked about, or government records with civil registration, and those were based on civil registration districts. So even though our ancestors moved around just a little bit, that 20 to 30 mile radius, they were still moving and they were still crossing those boundaries. So look all over the area in which you think your ancestor might be from. I have a family story that talks about how one of my ancestors was born in Birmingham, England, and I'm looking at actually a 3-county radius to try and figure out if he really was born in Birmingham or not. So just to give you some numbers behind this, to help you kind of give some perspective. In 1851 in England, there were 15,600 parishes. 15,000 parishes, 623 civil registration districts, and already 86 historic counties. And many of those overlapped. So use that knowledge to search in a variety of different counties, variety of different parishes. On Findmypast in our English records collection, you can actually use, there's a little slider bar on the search screen that allows you to go, 5 mile radius, 20 mile radius, 100 mile radius. Use that and play around with it to get records from various counties and parishes and civil registration districts in order to broaden your search a little bit. Okay, so that's probably the last misconception I'm going to cover, is just that this idea that people didn't move around and that it's, it's a really small island comparatively, but they really did move kind of around in little locations. And so we do have to research in a variety of areas. It's not necessarily that, you find one ancestor outside of London in some little parish and they were just there for the last 400 years. That's entirely possible, but it's not necessarily always the case. Okay, so let me go through a couple of your comments and see what you guys are saying. So Tammy says, the books are awesome. I have almost all of them. Tammy, I have to assume you're talking about the Great Migration series, and I absolutely agree. A fantastic series of books, and I use them all the time, actually, for colonial research. Fiona comments, civil registration in Scotland started in 1855. I think you mean England for 1837. You're right, I do. My apologies for not being clear on that. Scotland civil registration starts in 1855. England and Wales start in 1837. Nicole mentions that's a handy feature. And you made that comment when I was talking about the geographical sliders. So yes, I agree. It was funny when they first launched it and they kind of put it out to the company and said, we're going to do this. And isn't this really cool? And I looked at it, went 100 miles? That's it? That's not very far, right? Because I, again, had my North American hat on. And then I was talking to a colleague and he said, yeah, but Jen, that's like half the island, right, of England. I was like, oh, right, of course, yes. Yeah, that's 100 miles is quite far, actually, when you're talking about the British Isles. Good. All right, so those are a couple of key things that I wanted to share. And thank you all again for commenting. I appreciate it. Okay. So let's go to a couple of the questions that were posted. We didn't get very many in advance, so hopefully some of you have some other questions that you want to share. I'm hoping that will happen. Let me know if you have anything that you want to talk about. But Tammy on our Facebook page did ask about a particular situation. And this is a very interesting story, but I'm going to paraphrase it, Tammy. Basically, what happened was that her ancestor left England in the early 1930s and relocated to Canada. So they moved to Canada. The question is, what kind of ID was required for them to leave England? How easy was it for them to leave the country? Well, Tammy, it was actually very, very easy. They could almost quite literally just kind of get on the boat and go. There really wasn't any kind of ID or paperwork requirement to leave the country. So I actually asked one of our British experts this morning, and we kind of got into this whole conversation around passports, and I thought it was a little bit interesting. So what he told me is that actually passports in England was one of the last countries to start to apply passports and to actually ask their citizens to use them. So he tells me, and he gave me some information, in 1835, the Foreign Secretary argued with Belgium, actually, and told him that British passports, the individual in Belgium said that British passports should include a physical description. And the Foreign Secretary refused to do this and called it degrading and offensive that British people would have to write down what they looked like. So, in a passport, like even, in American history for ages, we've had passports that say I'm 5'1.5" feet and strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes, right? And this particular foreign secretary thought that was degrading and offensive to his people. And so British passports initially were basically just a piece of paper with their name on it. And they were signed by the foreign secretary up until 1857 and really just had, that's it. The person's name and kind of this printed signature. And that continued actually all the way through until 1914, long after countries like France and the United States had kind of established this passport program. So finally, passports, as we know them today, the little passport book, was created in 1921 when in Britain, along with 42 other countries. So kind of a huge conglomerate around the world did this all together. And so the passports didn't really exist until 1921. And that's when they become compulsory and start to include descriptions and photographs and that kind of thing. So back to the question. The question was more specifically around early 1930s. Passports were certainly in play by then, but were not as big of a record set as they might have been in other parts of the world. So Tammy, I'm going to recommend that you look at the passenger list leaving the UK collection, which is on Findmypast. It spans from 1890 to 1960. Try looking in that passenger list to see if you can find your immigrant in that collection. But other than that, there's not really going to be any documentation that I know of or was able to find that indicates that they would have left England, right? There was nothing, to my knowledge, required that they document their departure from the country. So best of luck. Help. Certainly, I hope that helps. I don't know if the passenger list will help or not. Tammy says, been there, done that. Oh, sorry, Tammy. And she did tell, the story does continue that they actually changed their names, and she's been able to find evidence of that. And they left England under their new names. So I will ask again, Tammy, and see if there's anything from a name change requirement, possibly, instead of the departure component. But at least for right now, that's what I've got for you. So unfortunately, we weren't able to help Tammy very much today. But Tammy, don't stop. Don't give up. We'll keep working on this, and hopefully we can help you out. David says, the passenger list database is great. Found my Polish displaced persons in that list. Yes, David, I totally agree. That passenger list, that leaving the UK passenger list, is an extraordinary collection. I've never found anything else like it on any of the other sites. I don't know of any other collection that's like that. Maybe someone can correct me on that. But I've not come across any other departure list that talks about leaving the UK. I have a couple of references from Germany, but that's more of a family story than I think it is actual evidence. So Tammy says, thank you. You're welcome, Tammy. And I hope that we can help you out in future series, future sessions. Okay, so there was a question about, oops, lost my screen. Hang on just a second. Sorry, guys. There was a question about Scotland. I'm going to scroll to that. I mentioned it at the beginning. Mary, this one's for you, Mary Feenan. I mentioned at the beginning that I'm definitely not a Scottish expert, and I am going to refer this question to our Scottish guy. But I will read it, and we can talk about it. We'll see if anybody here has any suggestions for Mary. So she's looking for a particular individual, Anne McGuigan, and I probably butchered that, sorry, Feenan, who was born in 1837. Her husband was Patrick, died in Scotland in 1864. She has a death certificate, and he's buried in the Greenock Cemetery Common Grounds. Okay, so we know that. She was a widow with 5 children. The youngest was a 3-day-old infant. Oh gosh, that's heartbreaking a little bit. The Glasgow City Archives checked the poor relief applications for that time with no results. James, her son, was in the Belfast area before immigrating to the U.S. in 1880. She searched Scotland and Ireland for years with no results. Any suggestions where to search? Well, it sounds like you've already done a pretty extensive search for what is available out there today online in terms of Scottish resources. If you've contacted the Glasgow City Archives already, that is unfortunate. They couldn't find anything. I can tell you that there are some new collections from Scotland coming on Findmypast in the next few months. I don't know that any of them in particular off the top of my head would be able to help you with this particular research. But what I would say is, if you have not yet done so, really thoroughly research anybody that came to the United States and their life here. And the reason I say that is because I actually I mentioned this story earlier. I have a family oral story that says that I have an ancestor who was born in Birmingham, England, and he theoretically came to the United States. Well, actually came to Canada first and then the United States. Relatively early, 1830s or so, 1840s, we think. And it talked about, the family history talks about, where his kids were born and Pennsylvania and Ohio and all this movement. The problem is that I couldn't find out which county of Pennsylvania. The town that was listed in the family history, there was like 7 different towns in Pennsylvania with that name. And I finally got onto researching each of the kids very, very thoroughly. They had several children, and one of them was a relatively successful businessman. He had one of those little biographies published in like a Who's Who in Washington, D.C. type book. And in that book, it says which county in Pennsylvania he was born in, which version of that town. And so from there, I was able to go back and actually find more records on the ancestor I was looking for, his father, based on the fact that from a kid's, from the child's information, I was able to get more about the parents. So do that really thorough research here in North America on anybody who hit our soil. In addition to the extra research that you might do in Scotland or Ireland. And I just simply, I know that people talk about doing exhaustive research, but it really is a very crucial component of trying to research on both sides of the Atlantic. And actually that kind of gleans into what I was going to say at the beginning, right? There's really 2 components I wanted to hit on today. And one was kind of these how-to research in the UK, and the other was this concept of exhaustive research. I often will say things like, where did your ancestors buy their shoes? You need to know those kinds of details about their life to be able to be successful in your UK research, because it really is going to be that one little piece of paper or that one little document, that one little story, that clue that gives you the opportunity to open a new layer of the onion. And so it's that story that I would recommend, right? It's that process that I would recommend. Even if you feel like you've already done that here, go back and double check your notes. Go back and double check your sources. And now is a great time to do that, right? When we can't necessarily dig into new research at different archives and libraries, but we can go back and double check ourselves. Right? And with every day, I get a little smarter. Every week, I learn something new about research and genealogy. No one can know everything. And certainly, I didn't know 5 years ago what I know today, and vice versa, right? I won't know what I'm going to know in 5 years, if that makes any sense. So go back and double check your notes. Make sure that you really have done as much thorough research on the whole family as possible. And just make sure that you haven't skipped over anything. I've beat that drum now. I'm gonna just step down off that stool. But Mary, go back and examine your notes, and I will also forward your question to our Scottish research guy and see if he has suggestions for you as well. But certainly keep Can Find My Past is growing soon. And if you are not already aware, we do a Find My Past Friday session. And we actually have for some time. We release new records every Friday. So one of our guys will go on Facebook every Friday and do an update on what the new records are. You might also check newspapers. I don't know if you've done that as either, but the newspaper collection on Find My Past is extensive. Okay, let me see a couple more questions in here. That's really good. Lori Ann says, reviewing research almost always reveals new clues that had always been there, but that I somehow missed. That's so true, Lori. I have another story. I'm sure we all have stories about this, actually. For a long time, I was looking for the name of my third great grandfather. I had like 5 different theories as to who that person could be. And I finally went back and looked at a Civil War pension that I'd had for probably 10 years. And in the pension, there's a letter from the soldier's niece. And once you research the niece and find out what her line is, you realize who that third great grandfather is, like, right away. And I was like, oh, duh, I had this the whole time, right? So yeah, sometimes it really just does take, forcing yourself to take a step back and reevaluate what you've already done. Okay, so Nicole says, my grandma always said that we are related to Princess Diana because there's Spencers in our family, but it's hard to find the link because Spencer is a very common name. Yeah, royalty research is actually, obviously a pretty popular thing in the UK especially. So I would actually suggest that if you really want to dig into that, put your GEDCOM on the Find My Past tree. And there's lots of good reasons to do this, and there's lots of reasons not to put your tree online, and I totally respect those opinions. But the reason I say that is because Find My Past just launched new tree-to-tree hints. Now, I am one of those people who does not just blindly accept a hint from anywhere and attach it to my tree. I research it thoroughly, but I really do think of it as a hint. It's a suggestion. It is someone else saying, hey, I think this might be your guy, and you should take a look. So if you put your GEDCOM on the Find My Past tree, you will start to get these tree-to-tree hints. And the thing about it, and I think the real benefit to those of us in the US, is that what we found when we did that, when we turned on that system, that service, was that many of the people who have trees on Find My Past, who are UK researchers, actually don't have their tree on any of the other websites. So I started getting hints of research that I have never seen before, even after researching for 15 years and examining online trees like crazy for any kind of clue. I was getting connections, and I actually got a connection to part of my Irish family, and I was really just ecstatic, right? Because Irish research is so hard. And it allowed me an opportunity to dig into a new set of records and create a new theory that I can now continue to research. So if you're really interested in that royalty line, Nicole, definitely take advantage of the free hints that is offered through Find My Past and those tree-to-tree hints. See if anything pops, right? I'm a genealogist first, so I'm always going to say don't accept it blindly. Look at the evidence, look at what's available to you, do your own research, make your own decisions. And But absolutely take advantage of the fact that the system, the computer, is doing a little bit of that digging through the rubble for you, right? That's kind of how I think about it. There's a giant pile of stuff out there, lots and lots of information out there. If the computer can take a little bit of that weight off of me, then great, right? I'll come back and figure out what they found, what the computer found, and sift through it for myself and make my own decisions. We're always smarter than the computers, aren't we? I think so. All right. Vicky Chapman Cox says, do you have a suggestion for finding info about people who moved from Ireland to England during the potato famine? Well, yeah, from Ireland to England, absolutely. So if they were migrating that direction, they were one of two categories. And I'm going to make some generalization statements here. So there are always examples of when you generalize that's incorrect, right? But I would say they're probably either incredibly destitute and desperate, right, which was the condition for many people, or they actually had enough money to get across the channel, and they might have had that money through property. One of the things that we tend to forget about the relationship between Ireland and England, and again, I'm generalizing, right, is that many of the Irish records are actually created by Englishmen, right? Because English people owned so much of the Irish island by the time of the famine, and certainly, well before then. So if you are looking for Irish research suggestions, if you're looking for records, absolutely look in both Ireland and England. And the same is true for Northern Ireland, right? Remember that Northern Ireland is a relatively new concept. So for a while, it was just Ireland, and the records are just, for Ireland, not for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So keep that in mind. You might want to go back and forth between the two countries looking for resources for both Irish and English. If you're specifically looking for, and Vicky, if you have additional questions, please add more details. But finding people who move from Ireland to England, so I think you're looking for things like passenger lists, but I would actually suggest that you start with the census and see if you can identify exactly where they went in England. And if you can, try to find out something about their occupation, because that may give you a hint and a suggestion as to how they managed to make that move and what kind of financial status they were in at the time. That financial status can be really important, right? Because it can give you a huge indication of what life was like during that period of history, family. Okay, Mary comes back and says, thanks very much for the suggestions. I've gotten wonderful newspaper articles about his death. That's good. Newspaper articles are always fascinating. I'm scrolling through a couple of these others here. Okay, Maggie. And yes, I'm drinking tea. Isn't that very Findmypast-ish of me? Okay, Maggie says she's looking for Miles McKeon, who married Bridget McDermott. Son Francis, born 1839, came to St. Louis. Francis, her paternal great-grandfather. Leitrim is what she's been told. Been there twice, no luck. What next? Well, that's funny. Oh, sorry. My dog is right at my feet. So he keeps moving around. And I don't want to kick him. I almost kicked him in the head. Okay, Maggie. So it's actually kind of funny because I had an Irish ancestor named Bridget. Well, I do have an Irish ancestor named Bridget, not past tense. And when I started my Irish research, I was told your Irish line comes from Bridget and she's from Ireland. And that's all the information we had. Okay, so a couple of suggestions. First, DNA is going to be so important when it comes to Irish research. The biggest breakthrough that my family has had on our Irish line came from DNA. And thank goodness I have a cousin who is very focused on the Irish research and on using DNA. So if you have not tested yet, please make sure that you do and try and test as many descendants as you can find to add that to your arsenal of tools in terms of genealogical research, right? It's not the answer, but it is absolutely a tool, and it's a powerful tool. When it comes to a place like Ireland with so much record destruction, absolutely utilize DNA. Okay, so the son Francis was born in 1839. I'm not sure if they came to St. Louis before or after that birth. If it was after, then you might have a little bit of luck on passenger lists, perhaps. But if they came to St. Louis, now St. Louis is a very Catholic area, and of course there's a lot of Catholics in Ireland, so I would start with the National Collection of Catholic Registers, Sacramental Registers. It's on Findmypast. It is available for free, actually forever. So if you're looking for Irish Catholics, it's a great place to start. St. Louis also has a wonderful collection. I believe it's the St. Louis Genealogical Society, indexed a vast amount of the Catholic records in the St. Louis area. So compare those Catholic records back and forth to see if you can find the family in anywhere in Ireland, and then again, recreating the family here in North America in St. Louis. I would definitely... If I didn't know already that they were of a different faith, I would assume Catholicism, and I would rely on those records heavily to see if there's any kind of luck there. I certainly would not restrict your search just to the Leitrim connection. I would look kind of anywhere within a 50-mile range of that area, and definitely contact local genealogical society or family history society, or a genealogical research company based in that area, so that you can get kind of on the ground advice, right? There's nothing beats just talking to someone who actually lives in that space, and get their advice on research and different resources and tools and repositories and archives that we may not know about, and may not be able to find. So Maggie, that's my suggestion, right? Catholic, and DNA, those would be my next steps. I don't know if you've already done that. Maybe you already have. But from what the information you've given me, that's what I would do next. Okay. Vicky says, thanks. You're welcome, Vicky. Beverly, thank you for confirming you can see us. That's good, because my screen still says it's having problems. So I'm just still assuming that everything is okay on your guys' end. Jill says, and this is a long one, so let me click on this button here. Okay. I actually follow my DNA matches backwards in time and have found some amazing ancestors. Congratulations. That's always exciting. Then I follow up seeking match relations who usually are the siblings or progeny who can also be traced pretty easily to the ancestor. It's great fun looking each time into my own personal window to the past, but I have a quite thorough tree and know my peeps. I love that. So when something unique pops up, I work it. I love that, Jill. Fantastic. So first, thanks for sharing that with us, because you gave me a perfect segue. Those of you who know me know that I love to just dig into the details of everything. I am fascinated by the lives that our ancestors lived, right? I kind of alluded to it earlier when I said something about, do you know where your ancestor got their shoes? I actually do have an ancestor where I know where he got his shoes. And I think that is kind of amazing, right? That you do get to kind of see history through a totally different perspective, right? We're all taught history and we can watch documentaries and all of that, but it's a completely different thing to actually dig into the records and learn about, something new and interesting. And I'll tell you this story. You guys are the first to hear this because I just discovered this a couple days ago, and I have to put my cup down because I'm excited. So I have this ancestor on my maternal side who was very successful in the foundry business in cast iron in the Cincinnati area, 1850s, 1860s, in that time frame. And I was chasing him through the newspapers the other day, just because I had a couple of spare hours. And I just thought, I'm just going to take a year at a time, because he's mentioned so often, because he's such an influential businessman in the area at that period, that he's in the newspaper a lot, right? And so I'm just going to take a year at a time and pull out everything I can find. So I'm running through the articles, and at the same time, I have an ancestor on my paternal side of my family who is also a very successful businessman, but in northern Ohio. And he was in the newspaper business. So I have these kind of at the same time frame, both of these ancestors. One is a direct ancestor, one's like a great uncle. And they both end up being millionaires. And they both have this incredible story. And so I'm reading this article about my ancestor in the foundry business in cast iron. And it talks about how he had this group of visitors who came and toured his factory. And it turns out that they were part of this Editors Association, Newspaper Editors Association. So I'm catching on to this because they printed about it in the papers for a few days, right? That this big group of newspaper editors from Ohio were having their kind of annual convention, if you will, in Cincinnati. And so the newspaper were covering kind of their activities day to day. And they talk about how the owner of the foundry, my ancestor, had greeted them personally, given them a personal tour, that the editors were very influential. And of course, you would imagine that he would want to be on the good side of the newspaper business, and that he treated them to lemonade and champagne and truffles and all this wonderful description. And so I find an article from the day before, and it actually happens to mention which of the members of this group had arrived in town that day and who had been voted into various offices. And my other ancestor on my paternal side was one of those people. So here is my paternal ancestor being toured around a factory by my maternal ancestor, right? The families wouldn't come together for several more generations until my parents married. But here they are interacting with each other. And I'm going, yeah, there's a possibility that at some point their paths crossed, but I have hard, firm evidence that one of my ancestors gave the other ancestor a tour and probably handed him a glass of champagne, right? And shook his hand. Like, that is, I'm getting all excited. I'm going to try and calm down. But that's what it's all about to me, right? And I think, Jill, that's part of what you're saying too, is that what an incredible thing to discover. What an incredible moment in history to know that each one of them made an impact in their own way. Each one of them, gave me the opportunity to exist. But here they are shaking hands, right? And I can picture it in my head. And I can kind of say, oh yeah, that was a moment that was captured innocently. And no one ever knew that 100 years later, their descendant would be going, oh my gosh, this is so cool, right? But what a moment to be able to capture. So Jill, I love your comment that, you know your peeps, and when something unique pops up, you just work it. And I love that. That's exactly what it's all about. I think for a lot of us, I went off on a tangent. It has nothing to do with UK research. But again, that's kind of what we hope that this discussion series is all about, is telling each other awesome stories. Nicole says, whoa, what are the odds? And that's exactly it. That was exactly it. I ran upstairs to my husband. I was like, look at what I found. And he kind of goes, oh, cool. And so I haven't gotten a chance to tell anybody that would understand it until now. So here you guys go. So you're the first to hear about that. It will definitely go into a lecture or something else down the road. But for now, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy that moment and that feeling of like, kind of, the high you get of doing the research. It's really cool. I tell people all the time how emotional genealogy is, right? How emotive this is. It's a powerful hobby. It's a powerful thing to spend your time doing. And we make these connections that really just last inside us for forever, right? It's just so cool. All right. So as we wind down, we've got, 8 minutes or so. Lori Ann says my husband reacts the same way. Yeah, I know, right? I think he tolerates very well. He does a good job. But a lot of it, he just doesn't get it. It is like a treasure hunt, Nicole. I totally agree. And Ron, thank you. Wonderful. That's an awesome story. Oh, Tammy has a similar experience, actually. So let me read out Tammy's story here really quick. If I can figure out which way my mouse is working. Gosh. All right. Similar experience from Tammy. Found out a few days ago. Oh, so this is very recent as well. That my partner's 2 times great-grandmother was aunt to my high school principal, whom I liked. Okay, that's good. The hubby did not even grow up in the area. He is a Vancouver Islander by birth, and I'm in Langley Township. I wish I'd known this sooner. The principal passed in 2013. Would have liked for them to meet. Oh, what a sweet story. That's really, really, really special, Tammy. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's really incredible. Lorianne says, what a neat way to describe it. I'm called the detective of the family. Yeah, that's absolutely true, right? I think every family has one. I think, that's the tagline, but it's actually true. Every family does have one. And I'm glad that you're with me and that you are all the detectives of your families. That's really cool. All right. So with that, again, 6 minutes left. So what's the plan next? I am going to close this down in 6 minutes. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have. If nothing else, I got to listen to myself talk for an hour. But I'm going to share some blog posts in the thread in the comments of this video, and also a couple of different record sets that I recommend that people look at when they're starting their UK research. So the first is going to be our UK Census Collection. I'm going to share the link to the 1939 Register, and then I'm going to share a variety of links to England and Wales civil registration, parish registers, births, baptisms, deaths, and marriages. Now, some of those collections are quite large, like the Death and Burials collection is 14 million records. So hopefully some of you will be able to find something. And it'll be a great place to start. I'm also going to share a couple of blog posts that are on the Findmypast blog about getting started in the UK, some common obstacles, how to overcome them. And then we have a search guide to the US Census, or not the US, the UK Census, that will hopefully help you out a little bit as you get started kind of crossing the pond. Now, some of you have been researching overseas, it sounds like, for many years, and some of you maybe haven't even started yet. But again, think of this as a platform for you to share and learn from each other. We also have a Facebook group called Findmypast Forum. It is, I will be honest, it's predominantly UK researchers right now, but it is a fantastic place to learn. I don't post a lot in that group, but I do read a lot. I learn a lot. I gain a lot from the various stories and research techniques that they apply. So join Findmypast Forum if you haven't already, to take advantage of the skill set that our British and Irish and Welsh and Scottish colleagues have. And they're sharing that information and helping each other out and using Findmypast a lot. And so please do join the Findmypast Forum as well. And see what you can pick up, right? Maybe they'll have some suggestions, probably better suggestions than I have, especially when it comes to Scottish research. It's not my strength. So what's the plan moving forward? We plan on doing this session every Wednesday afternoon, at least for the time being. The UK is in lockdown for at least another 3 weeks. They announced that yesterday, I believe. So we'll do this for a little while longer. I mentioned at the beginning it's an experiment, and it really is. If you guys like it and we get enough views and enough traffic on the page and everything, then they'll tell me to keep going. But it doesn't mean that it has to stay in this format. It doesn't have to stay me talking. I've already mentioned that we want to bring in some guests, and we're going to do that in a couple of weeks. I think our first guest is in 2 weeks. And that will be a great hour together. But if you have suggestions as to what would make this better for you, or what you like or you don't like, then please do share them, right? Don't be shy. You're not going to hurt my feelings. This is just me trying new things. So next week, at the same time, Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Mountain, 1 o'clock Pacific, we're going to talk about North American records that are on Findmypast. Now, most people think about Findmypast as a source for British and Irish records, and it absolutely is. We have an outstanding collection for British Isles research. But we also have these little hidden gems for North America that not very many people seem to know about, and we need to change that because they're incredible records, actually. And I use them all the time, but they're not just for me, they're for everybody. So we'd like to talk about North American records next week. I'm going to share some of my favorites with you. Comments are always welcome. So throughout the week, if you think of something or if you think of a topic you want us to cover, then by all means, throw that in the comments in the conversation here, and we'll add it to the schedule, and we'll shift things around. We'll pivot as you guys need us to. All right, so that is everything that I wanted to say. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to check comments one more time. Norma says, the Civil War was the end of my mother's rich ancestors. Their house was taken over by the Union soldiers and looted and destroyed the Rice family. Oh, that was the end of the money, Norma. I get it. I thought Rich was a surname at first. I have some Southern ancestors too, and that exact situation didn't happen, but I have been able to find a couple of, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I don't know if it was looted actually by the Union or destroyed in any way, but I was able to find a description of the house that my ancestors in Alabama lived in through the National the Register of National Historic Places. I've used them a handful of times for a variety of things, but you might look at that register to see if there is anything about their property or their house before it was lost. You never know. Tammy says it's been lots of fun. Thank you very much, Tammy, and thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. I myself appreciate it very sincerely. Thank you for spending an hour of your time with me. I know time is precious, especially now. And it just means a lot that we can hang out a little bit and I can talk to my genealogy people. I really miss all you guys. So Tammy, thanks for being with us. And that goes to all of you. A lot have been very about that. So thank you very much for being with us. And thank you very much for participating at some point. Julie says, thanks and great job, Jen. Thank you, Julie. Sharon says, you're great. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Sharon. And look forward to next week, Janet. Thank you. Me too. So we will be ready for next week. So join us again Wednesday at 2 p.m. Mountain. Please tell your friends and share the video. And hopefully you can get away with my goofy sense of humor. And we'll just learn from each other. So that takes us to the end of the hour. Thank you very much for joining. Let's discuss with Find My Past. And I will see you all next week. Have a great week. Be safe. Be healthy.